Let's talk about TV shows from the 80s and 90s that you might have forgot about. I already did a video, actually I think I did 2 videos on this topic. But yeah, basically I'm talking about shows from the 80s or 90s that maybe you've never even heard of, or some that maybe you used to watch, but it's been so long since you've seen them that you forgot that they exist. So today we're going to talk more about those shows, but today's video is going to be a little bit different because we're talking about shows from the 80s and 90s that you forgot existed, Nickelodeon edition.
On the Lord, I'm here with my friend. You watching Nickelodeon.
Back in the day, we had so many choices of things to watch because there were just so many good things on TV. Of course, there were also some things that weren't too good and didn't last very long, and so we might have missed them. Now, once cable TV started gaining popularity, there was even more cool stuff to watch. And I know for me, 2 channels that were always on were MTV and Nickelodeon. And so today I want to talk about some of those shows that were on Nickelodeon in the early days. Before we get started talking about the shows, I'll tell you a little bit about Nickelodeon, just in case you don't know what it is, maybe you grew up without a television. Nickelodeon originally aired as a test broadcast in 1977 as part of an early cable system in Columbus, Ohio.
We took everything that was wrong with children's television and got rid of it.
The station changed their name to Nickelodeon and launched nationwide on April 1st, 1979. Hey, I didn't know that Nickelodeon came out the same year that I was born. Something that's kind of cool that you might not even remember used to be a thing is initially Nickelodeon was commercial free, like a lot of cable stations were, and they actually remained commercial free until 1984. Man, those were the days. Now everything has commercials. Even this video. Now I feel like a good way to start off this list is with the very first show to ever air on Nickelodeon, even though it's a show that I don't really remember watching, but still, it's the first show ever, so I think we gotta kick it off with Pinwheel. Personally, I don't really remember watching Pinwheel. I think maybe by the time we got cable, I might have been a little bit too old because that show was geared towards preschoolers, but I definitely remember the show. I really remember the intro. Pinwheel was created in 1977 as part of that same local cable station in Columbus, Ohio that would go on to be Nickelodeon. The show was set inside of a house that was powered by a pinwheel on the roof, and the cast was made up of a mix of puppets and humans. Now, like I said, Pinwheel was created in 1977, but it ran on Nickelodeon from 1979 to 1988.
Pinwheel will be back after these messages.
It then was moved over to the brand new Nick Jr., and once again, it was the first show to air on Nick Jr., and it ran on Nick Jr. from 1988 until 1990, at which point they started slowly phasing it out to replace it with the next show on our list, Eureka's Castle.
Eat with your wonderful days to be. Castle!
The thing that's kind of funny about Eureka's Castle is I just mentioned that Pinwheel, I don't really remember watching it because I was a little too old by the time that came out, but I do remember watching Eureka's Castle, and I would have been a lot older when this show came out. Eureka's Castle was on from 1989 until 1991, not nearly as long as Pinwheel. The characters on the show were developed by R.L. Stine, who was also the head writer. The show was about a cast of characters that lived inside of a giant music box. The giant would come out with this big castle-shaped music box, and inside of that music box was Eureka and all of the other puppets, and the giant would wind it up, and that's how the show started. You know, that's a lot like Yo Gabba Gabba. I don't know how I never realized that. I wonder if Christian Jacobs kind of borrowed that idea from Eureka's Castle. Okay, so there is no way that I can talk about Nickelodeon without talking about this show. Although it's not originally a Nickelodeon show, it was a staple of Nickelodeon, and this show is also responsible for creating green slime. I'm talking about You Can't Do That on Television. You Can't Do That on Television hit the airwaves in 1979, and it was originally produced and aired in Ottawa. But by season 3, it was picked up by Nickelodeon, and it was on Nick from 1981 until 1990. I had no idea that it was on the air for that long. And they actually showed reruns of it until 1994 when they replaced it with a similar show, All That. You Can't Do That on Television had multiple cast members that went on to have success in the entertainment industry, but probably the most notable one when she wasn't busy writing hate songs about Joey Gladstone. That's right, Alanis Morissette, and I had already mentioned that they're responsible for Green Slime. Now apparently the way that this came about was an accident. On the very first show, they had come up with this gag where they were going to dump stuff on one of the cast members, and they went to the cafeteria in the studio and they got a bunch of the leftover food and they put it in a bucket, but then production of that episode got pushed by a week. All of the food in the bucket had turned green with mold, and they decided to dump it on the cast member anyway. People that worked on the show were really angry about them dumping this moldy food, but the audience loved it. The reaction was huge, and so much so that they decided that it had to be a regular part of the show, and they actually wrote an entire episode about green slime. That's where they introduced the fact that when you said, "I don't know," that's when you got slime. And as you know, it went on to be a huge thing for Nickelodeon. But although You Can't Do That on Television was the one to start the green slime, it was another show that really took it to the next level. Double Dare, one of the biggest and best shows of all time. If you grew up during that time, you were definitely watching Double Dare. And like I just mentioned, they took the whole green slime thing and they took it to a whole nother level, and the audience loved it. So much so that Nickelodeon was like, more slime, and they were using it in every physical challenge and in the obstacle course at the end. And then after that, green slime just became like the symbol of Nickelodeon. They came out with the green slime shampoo and GAC, and they were using it at the Kids' Choice Awards. And if you went to Nickelodeon Studios, they had the green slime fountain. It was everywhere. And like I said, it's all because of You Can't Do That on Television and Double Dare. Double Dare was originally on Nickelodeon from 1986 until 1993, and then there was a revival in 2000 that I don't remember at all. And then they had another revival from 2018 to 2019, and that one wasn't too bad. I actually watched that one. But in 1986, when the show premiered, people loved it, and it almost immediately more than tripled Nickelodeon's viewers for their afternoon lineup, making Double Dare the most watched cable show. Double Dare also helped Nickelodeon become a major player in the cable TV universe, making it a legitimate station, and it also helped popularize kids' game shows, and there were a lot that followed, especially on Nickelodeon. Alright, so this next one, I'm going to guarantee that more than half of you have never even heard of this show, and probably those of you that have heard of it, I bet the majority of you have never watched it. And the funny thing about that, this is my favorite Nickelodeon show, probably one of my favorite shows of all time, but nobody knows about it, and that's because it only lasted one season, just 13 episodes, and I'm talking about Skate TV. So for me, being a kid that was obsessed with skateboarding, to have a TV show all about skateboarding, I mean, that was a really big deal. And I was already watching Nickelodeon all the time. So when they came out with a skateboarding show, that was just amazing. I had my skateboarding videos that I watched all the time, but to have a weekly skateboarding show, it was just mind-blowing. And I can't believe there were only 13 episodes, because I feel like I watched that every week for years. I mean, I probably did. I was probably watching the same 13 episodes over and over again. I remember that my dad used Skate TV to wake me up on the weekends. I would sleep in late, and then when Skate TV came on, my dad would crank up the TV as loud as possible, and then as soon as that helicopter noise started, I would shoot right up, and I was good to go. This is the first show on this list that's not an 80s show. This one came out in 1990, and as I mentioned, it was on for just one season, and it was hosted by the late, great Skate Master Tate, one of the nicest guys I've ever met, and also Matt Lynn, who some of you probably know as Matthew Lillard. Also, as I mentioned, the show was made by skaters, for skaters.
The only skateboarding show made by skaters for skaters.
And it was directed by Stacy Peralta, the same genius who brought you your favorite skateboarding videos. And the show also featured your favorite skaters: Tony Hawk, Mike McGill, Christian Asoy, Tony Alva, Lance Mountain had a reoccurring workshop, Ray Barbie, Ray Underhill, basically any skater that was popular in the 80s or before. They were on Skate TV. Now, the show was filmed at the Pink Motel in the San Fernando Valley, and the pool is still there and it's still empty, and it's amazing to see the Skate TV pool. I have always wanted to skate it, and I've had the opportunity, but I chickened out. But I'm declaring that this year in 2025, I will skate the Skate TV pool. Not well, but I'm at least gonna roll around in it. That's my goal for this year. Let's get back to 80s shows for a few minutes. Now, this one came out in 1989, and it was on until 1991 for a total of 5 seasons, and it's another extremely popular Nickelodeon show, Hey Dude.
Hey, dude. It's a little wild and a little strange.
Hey Dude was set on a fictitious dude ranch in Tucson, Arizona, and it was about the ranch owner and his son and the employees that worked there for the summer. And they actually filmed it at on a real ranch or at a resort in Tucson, Arizona. But in order to not disturb the guests that were staying at the ranch, they built a whole nother ranch on the property, but about a mile away. And when the show was done being filmed, they just abandoned all of those buildings, and a lot of them are still standing. Now, I have never been to the Hey Dude sets, but some other people have, and there's some videos that you can find on YouTube. But hopefully, one day I will make it to the Hey Dude sets before it's too late. So we've been having a lot of fun with physical challenges and riding skateboards, but now it's time to learn something. Mr. Wizard's World was on Nickelodeon from 1983 until 1989, and it was a reboot, kind of a more upbeat version of the original show from the 1950s. Mr. Wizard's World came out of Canada, and it was a children's show that taught you about the science behind everyday things. And a lot of these shows are coming out of Canada.
What are you talking about?
Now, personally, I always enjoyed watching Mr. Wizard's World, and I must not be the only one, because during its run on Nickelodeon, it was number 3 in the ratings. Now, here's one that I actually kind of forgot about, but now the memories have been completely unlocked.
Well, I guess that's all locked up tight now, as it should be. Hi there, Jody.
Oh, hi, Sam.
Today's special was a Canadian kids show. Here's another one out of Canada. It aired from 1981 until 1987 on TV Ottawa and on Nickelodeon in the United States. Now, just in case your memory is a little fuzzy on this one, the show was set inside of a department store in Toronto, and Jody would show up after hours with a mannequin, and then that mannequin would come to life. And you know what? That's kind of like the movie Mannequin. Maybe that's where they got the idea. Okay, so far, a lot of the shows on this list have been from the 80s, but the 90s is where Nickelodeon really exploded. I mean, that's when they started to have a lot of their original programming, and that's when they introduced Nicktoons. But we gotta talk about some 90s shows. But we're not gonna talk about the big ones like SpongeBob SquarePants or Pete and Pete or Clarissa Explains It All. I wanna talk about Wienerville. So Wienerville was actually an extremely popular show on Nickelodeon, but I still feel like it's kind of forgotten. Like, I haven't heard anybody talk about that show in a really long time. It was on from 1993 until 1997, but it was just 2 seasons, and it was hosted by Mark Wiener, and he used a giant puppet stage that looked like the fictional city Wienerville. The show quickly gained popularity, so much so that Mark and the Wienerville Puppets even hosted the Nick New Year's Eve special. And a little bit later in the show's run, it became part of the Stick Stickly show. Remember that one?
I'm Stick Stickly, your soon-to-be host.
So here's one that, in my opinion, is another staple of Nickelodeon, especially 90s Nickelodeon. And for some reason, I always group this one with Hey Dude. I'm talking about Salute Your Shorts. So I'm sure most of you remember Salute Your Shorts, but just in case you don't, it focused on the life of campers at the fictional Camp Anawana, and it was based on the 1986 book Salute Your Shorts, Life at Camp. And despite its very short run on Nickelodeon and its very limited release on home video, it was still consistently one of the highest rated shows on Nickelodeon, and today it still has a cult following. And if you watched this show in the 90s, I'm pretty sure you're still able to sing the theme song.
And when we think about you, it makes me wanna fart.
Alright, so I told myself that I was only going to do 10 shows on this list, but there were just so many that I wanted to talk about, so I'm going to talk about just one more. I saved one of my favorites for last.
Welcome to Wild and Crazy Kids.
Wild and Crazy Kids was only on from 1990 until 1992, and it was a game show where they had large groups of kids that would compete against each other in physical challenges. And one of the things that made this show really cool was that they would always go to really cool places. Like, the one that always stands out to me is when they went to Magic Mountain. And I think at that time I had never been to Magic Mountain, so to see them going on all of these rides was just really exciting to me. And another episode that stands out was when they went to Raging Waters. Now, the show had 3 hosts, one of which was Omar Gooding, who you might know from Baby Boy, and he's also the brother of Cuba Gooding Jr. And Wild and Crazy Kids also had a ton of guest stars, including Lark Voorhees from Saved by the Bell, Jonathan Taylor Thomas from Home Improvement, Michael Fishman from Roseanne, and the entire cast of Salute Your Shorts. I gotta tell you, I miss every show that we talked about today, especially Skate TV and Wild and Crazy Kids. So how many of these did you remember, and how many of these did you used to watch? Let me know in the comments. Now, hopefully you enjoyed this little list, and we'll do this again really soon. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.